Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask you to give a very warm Limerick welcome to Professor Dolores Cahill.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. And just to also thank George Hook for coming and for giving his speech, and for Michael Lee for giving me such a kind introduction. I won't keep you very long today. I just want to quickly tell you what the Irish Freedom Party is about, where we are, why we got here. To the music. Thank you. Very good. So, where I think Ireland is now, how part of the policies that we have is to get out of the European Union, why that matters, and how we do have a positive future. So there is actually a way to get out of this. So I think what I'd just like to say is where we are now in Ireland, it's kind of been a 20 or 30 years of systemically making us feel that the country is out of control and that the proper response to that is to be worried or to be afraid. Because it looks like we are electing politicians that you can actually solve things, it turns out. You can actually solve things. You could actually solve housing. You could solve the healthcare system. But in the last 20 or 30 years, we've been taught to say, oh no, you can't actually solve banking. You can't solve education. For example, half of our people who leave education every year go to university. But there's no proper structure for people who don't go to university. Now, that's been the case since the 80s, 90s, 2000s, it's 40 years. That is a completely solvable problem. Another problem, for example, we have the IDA that goes for foreign direct investment, and we have Enterprise Ireland that supports companies that export. And I have, for 25 years in my various roles in government advisory and in the EU in Ireland, saying, why don't we have an agency that helps people who actually export or make products that are in Ireland, small Irish businesses? So I'm not going to list out all of the issues that are here, but one of the reason why I'm here is that I was very happy to be on the Government Advisory Science Council from 2004 to 2014, and that deals with all aspects of research, technology, innovation, everything that affects us from primary school to foreign direct investments to the universities teaching of maths. I think when I was younger that politicians got elected because they believed in making Ireland a better place. But I genuinely did. And I kind of thought, okay, we're in safe hands. And so then you had one crowd in for a decade and nothing much happened and there was all these scandals. And then you have the other guys who talk the good talk, but nothing really changed, right? Nothing changes in health, nothing changes in education, nothing changes in banking, nothing changes in housing. And I was hoping to hear someone else in the last 10 years say, wouldn't it be good if we just took things out? Because, one of the things in the world now and in the European Central Bank, when a country like Greece can hardly pay the interest on the money they've borrowed at a very low rate, what's the answer? Give them more money. And if they don't want to take it, replace their government. So they have to take more money that they can't even pay the interest on. So that is the current way economics is taught in the universities, but that actually doesn't really make any sense. So part of the thing that I would do, I spent 10 years now trying to figure out what's going on, and I don't know what the agenda behind the chaos is. So really where we are now, it's as if we have a combination that we have to be afraid that the country is out of control, but the politicians are not at all even, what I used to say to them is, could you not just address one problem per year? Could you not just try? And it's all insolvable. So where this comes back to Irish Freedom Party is that I actually think that all the parties in the Dáil, first of all, are all really the same. They don't really believe in free speech. And it's not really, I think it's not a version of, whether you're so-called left or right or Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. I think what we want, they are, I would say, like a country that's run by a group of people, an autocracy or whatever, just an elite. And they're quite happy to stay in, and they're really worried about, will I get elected the next time, and will I say something wrong? Because if I say something wrong, I'll be cut out and I won't get elected. So I suppose with us in Irish Freedom Party, we're like the 30-year-old journalist that George Hook was mentioning, right? I wish I was 30, I'm not. But 20 years later, we are ordinary people who say, you know what, wouldn't it be good to just have at least a vision for Ireland where we could sort out one or two things? And even if nobody elects me, I don't really mind. But what I would like to do is to become articulate enough and have policies behind us so that either if you get elected or you're on an interview, that if someone says something that's blatantly rubbish, that because I've never been on social media deliberately, that first of all I don't care about social media, and also that you could just say, no, that is wrong, or actually that is incorrect. And so why I'm very happy to be involved in Irish Freedom Party is because we have all these professors and policy people who are going to dedicate years of their lives to try and figure out what is the real truth. That we could then come up with some solutions, and even, I hope, I get elected, it would be great. But even if I don't get elected, that we can change the discussion. So to just stop the rubbish, like, oh yeah, it's EU money. You know, for example, in the EU, we're net contributors. So it's actually our money. And so what they do is, I don't know if anyone, I had my second radio interview during the week with a very nice senator, and she spent the whole time going, but EU money built this, and EU money built that. You know, and you're saying, no, that's our money. It sits in Brussels for 6 months and then it comes back. I mean, you'd want to be pretty stupid, you know, if you think we pay tax and we give it to Brussels and they give it back, that it's somehow EU money. And so part of the thing, though, where it comes back to free speech is that because for 20 or 30 years nobody has been challenging these people, you know, in all aspects of health or the environment or banking or housing or education, that they actually, part of the real value of free speech and why free speech underpins democracy and our republic is that in a democracy, if you have free speech and someone says something that's stupid or wrong, they can be challenged. Whereas if you have this consensus culture in the Dáil or whatever, they are so afraid that if someone, I bet you if someone said to them, I was thinking if I would ask them a question, you know, could they say there was a difference between male and female? I bet you that would stump them. So what could be very useful, because what I see in rural Ireland is that all of the policies in the last 15 years are only about taking out, you know, doctors and taking out policemen and taking out post offices. But what you could do in a small community is have what we used to have in Kilcash, Kilsheelan, is parish halls. And what you could have is that the guard would come for half a day, the doctor would come half a day, you know, the post office, so that it's not that each of them would have to, you know, rent, you know, communities and they have all the burdens, that we could actually figure out quite innovative ways. And then the government system, the way we have now, only really has control if we agree to that system. So our Buckminster Fuller said, if you want to change something, I'm paraphrasing, if you want to change something, you don't try and change the existing model. You develop a new model and work towards that and make the old one obsolete. So I think as a little political party, we mightn't change the world, we mightn't get elected, but if we were to come up with systems just so that, because I think it's vitally important that rural Ireland and small towns and small communities don't get railroaded the way the agenda seems to be, to make it very difficult that you can't drive cars without. I'm nearly done. Quickly and with very little money, from nothing, reinstigate very high quality education system and healthcare, and it costs very little. And of course I came back and said, why can't we do that here, right? So it doesn't mean that we have to have a whole lot of money. And what people really want when they're living in society is to be happy and healthy and not be afraid that they're going to be homeless or that they won't have enough money for their pension. And the way the politicians just talk about an economy all the time, and nobody actually says, is that what we want? We all just want to be healthy and have our kids healthy and get a good education and work. So I know that's a very long-winded way, but I just wanted to say there is hope, right? It is not that difficult. And what we would like to do is to challenge the consensus first, and even if we don't get elected and we never get into power, maybe we might take them out of their sleepwalking into their pensions, right? So they'll actually do something for Ireland. Or if we got into power, we might spend the next few years trying to figure out how we could practically implement something. And then we would have an implementation plan that we would stick to. And if people voted and we brought it in, hold us to account. And if we don't, then don't vote for us anymore. So that's all. Dolores Cahill, if I stand, I'm going to stand. Please vote for me. Thank you very much. And the other, I just had a few books actually that if you can listen to. There's an interview with John Taylor Gatto online. It's about 2 hours. And he won an award in America for being Teacher of the Year. And what he realized is that the education system wasn't helping young people, and he was in the Bronx where half of them would never go to college. And so he just set up a system to say if you're 14, he let them go 1 day a week to do what they loved. And they actually changed the world. So they got parks made, and they introduced water standards at 14 in the swimming pool. And he realized that the education system that was set up in America is for if you go to university, you do have the opportunity to do lots of different things. But if the education system for people who don't go to university, it was undermining their individuality and also taking out their love of country and their value, and supporting the nurture that people automatically have for the country that they live in. So it is actually quite easy. And in his book, he mentions how you know whether an education system has gone downhill. And how you can change it. And my daughter is in junior cert, and after her year, do you know what the grades are? They're not like A, B, C, D anymore for subjects. They are meeting expectations, below expectations, right? This is coming on the junior cert, right? Meeting expectations, above expectation, below expectation. But of course, whose expectation? So it means that if you can't read and you gave 3 or 4 sentences, there's no standard. You're just meeting expectation. So what I think why it's not going to work, this sovereignty thing, is that it goes against common sense and it goes against human nature. Because what people want to do is provide for their family. They don't just want to sit at home and watch TV. But if you have an education system that indoctrinates them for 8 hours a day, about victimhood and whatever, that you shouldn't provide and there's something wrong with hard work, then that's not going to work. So I think one of the things is that if you call out the education system, so I think above expectation, if I was saying that has to be gone, right? That's not what you want. Above expectation, meeting expectation. I mean, how do you know was that's good or not? So I think the value of sovereignty, it's been undermined, right? So the reason why all of the people we say in the door get away with that is because if anyone stands up to say, you know what, I'm proud of my country, I love my country, then you're a racist or a bigot. And so why I'm here today, because I'm not on social media, is, let them try, right? Whatever they say, exactly as George Hook said, that it isn't. We just have to come back and say, why are you saying that? That doesn't make any sense. And so why you're here today is enough of us have to get the courage, and which includes me. I mean, I'm not, media savvy or whatever, is just to learn how we can challenge them and change the dialogue so that for the next generation, because I think we've kind of lost 15 years, the people, when I've met young people traveling around Europe in the last few weeks in Ireland, and they say things back like, people, they didn't know what they were voting for, right, in Brexit. And you say, well, that's democracy, that's the vote. And they think it's wrong. Right? So they actually think it's wrong that Trump got elected, and it's entirely wrong, and they don't get it. So I think what we have to do is kind of plan from our 2020, 2030, 2040, where we take back control of our lives, and we value, it's okay to love our country, it's okay to value sovereignty, and we try and get our neutrality back. And if, because of that, we decide, okay, we're better to leave the EU, that's one way of getting control. But we need to get societal control back as well in our public domains, freedom of speech, education, and parents need to stand up if some rubbish has been taught in their schools. You need to have, you could have a day where people just don't send their kids to school. I was thinking you could have a day where people in Ireland didn't use their credit card. You know, we give power to the government by waiting, wondering, you know, while our communities, local, small communities are destroyed. So what we need to do is say, you know, if you could do something that costs nothing, or set up a small bank, or one or two, then we just move our business to that bank. And if one community in Ireland said, we're going to try it in one little village where we have 20 empty houses, that maybe people could volunteer also to help those families and show that it works. So I think what we can't do and won't work is wait for them to change. So we have to have an intermediate strategy that we could come with very practical policies as Irish people helping ourselves. Not relying on the government, but just even in our expertise, or just trying to have one or two model villages where it would work, and then show that it is more cost efficient, and then move our businesses. I mean, can you imagine if you had, like the way Avonmore was set up 20 years ago, where farmers actually took control. Now, I know that has gone on to be powerful, but I keep thinking, why don't farmers do the same thing themselves, you know, and direct to, you know, another 20 years on, you could do the same thing, or the farming community, the way it was what was the bank? The agricultural bank? ACC, yeah, which helped me get to college, right? They gave small loans to farmers. So that it's not impossible, that you couldn't just have a community of people, or we could come together and say, let's have a radio station. I'm not saying it's not up to us to do it, but I suppose we've seen how disastrous, I think the country has really gone downhill in the last 12 years. I mean, it's shocking. So I suppose it turns out that if they had any patriotism at all, they could have thrown small bits of breadcrumbs to Ireland, but they haven't done. So really, I think they've lost credibility and they really don't care. So I think it's up to us. We're not going to get elected probably in the next 5 or 10 years. Herman will, maybe we will. I hope we do, but we're not going to change things. But if we had an intermediate strategy with a lot of these policy experts, we could have a plan for what would happen in parallel to getting into power, and then you take away a lot of the power from them.